Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tiff Talks Tech. Today, I have with me Paul McClain, who's the founder and chief marketing advisor of AiinaT Brand Solutions. And we're going to be talking about the disconnect that happens in AI in our industry and getting AI tools to talk to each other in multifamily. So I'm really excited because all of this talk about AI, and half the time it's really difficult when it doesn't work. And that's kind of something we want to dig into today. So before we dive in, Paul, you've been on both the strategy and the execution side of multifamily marketing. Can you share a little bit about your journey and how AiinaT Brand Solutions came to be?
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be on
Yeah.
with you. INAT was born in my brain many years ago. The company was founded and named after my mother. Basically, what I do is offer consulting services for multifamily owner and operators in the marketing space. Kind of grew up in the business, was on site as a leasing agent, did the assistant manager role. Figured out I didn't really like being a manager all that much because I wanted to be doing too much, and so stepped into a marketing role and found out that that was really my passion. So here we are, 13 years later. This is what we're doing.
I love it. Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
it's so helpful that you have that background experience because I think it just gives you a lot of credibility and being able to understand how it all works.
Yes. I mean, if you don't know and you're not at the table, it doesn't work as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I know your main focus is really the intersection of marketing, operations, and tech. So, was there a moment where it all clicked for you and you're like, this is the thing I need to be paying attention to?
yeah, I when I realized that our industry wasn't kind of adapting as quickly to what I wanted them to be doing, you find that gap in what's happening and you kind of have to learn how to fill it, right? So I think the changes in our industry, we weren't moving quickly enough. And now that we are, we don't have the right people at the table. And so
Yeah.
I think in this space, it's important for us to really include everyone and really kind of make a conscious effort to kind of back into whatever goal we have, right? If you
Mm,
have a goal with AI, moving forward to the end goal and then backing into it, at least in my experience, has been a bit more successful because you're not as reactionary, you're more proactive. So that's how I
yeah.
like to do things. I don't like to react, I
Yeah.
like to be proactive.
Which is so important, and I've seen so many people get wrong, even myself sometimes, like, where we just react instead of thinking ahead, so I love that you pointed that out.
Well, it's hard not to, right? You know, marketing
Yeah.
is in general the people that everybody calls. You know, we need to cut budget or we need to
Mhm.
increase budget. Like we're
Yeah.
the red flag people, so we're used to that, I suppose.
Yeah, I feel like marketing's always the catch-all for half the time if something was wrong, we would figure that out in marketing even if it had nothing to do with us.
Yep, yep. I mean, but hey, that's the what I kind of like about being in our role is that it allows for us to see kind of everything in a different
Yeah.
view and lens, and allows us to be more supportive to the other roles in the organization
Yeah.
in a better way.
Right. I love the fact that marketing is such a support role because you really feel like you're helping a lot of different kinds of people. So, yeah, I
Yes,
think that's great.
yes.
Yes. So, I know you work with a wide mix of owner operators and different tech platforms. What is one trend or a challenge that you see that comes up all the time consistently, no matter the size of the client?
Yeah, the silos, we were kind of talking about having the right people at the table.
Yeah.
When we're vetting these solutions, we're doing so in a silo, whether that's the C-suite, whether that's marketing and not talking to operations. So I believe that's the first problem.
Yeah.
We set ourselves up to fail from the get because we don't have all of our stakeholders. And often because people like you and I aren't at the table talking about vetting a rollout like this in the first place. So if
Yeah.
you and I were sitting at the table, we might have that foresight and the thought to say, hey, let's stop a minute and back up. What do we need? But sometimes people don't share that marketing brain and that problem solving piece. And so having someone like us at the table or someone who's going to use it, right? The leasing team, if
Yeah.
that's them, operations, it's critical to have all of your stakeholders on, at the beginning, because if you don't, it's going to fall down somewhere.
Yes, I always come back to the first time I rolled out AI. property wide. And I remember we had a vendor in mind, we were all set. And then we had a regional who found one that was out of industry and they were like, we're putting this on our properties. I'm like, wait a
Oh,
minute,
no.
wait a minute. Did you even vet it? Did you look at it? Does it connect with our systems? Is it blah, blah, blah? We don't care. We want it on the properties. Okay, fine. So we said, can we A/B test it with something else? And I remember we had to turn off that other platform immediately because it wasn't industry specific. It didn't work. It didn't connect. I feel like they lost so many leads because they didn't have the right people, like you're saying. They didn't check
Mhm.
with anybody and they were just like, this is our agenda. We're going to do it. Here you go.
Well, and I think sometimes our marketing suppliers do their best to establish a need and a mindset from the client, right? But when you get into integrations on the back end while you're rolling out AI, if you don't know what you're talking about, man, the spider web can just, I feel like it's a cracked windshield and it hits it and then it just explodes, right? Because you
Yeah.
find one issue and then it leads to another because it wasn't properly vetted. So,
Totally. And I mean, this
yeah,
was like 7 years ago before AI has gotten even more advanced. I can't imagine now, like all the things you really have to consider when you're going to
yeah,
implement something like that.
for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So what does a typical project look like for you these days? And where do you find yourself spending most of your time? Is it strategy, fixing messes, coaching teams?
All of it, all of it.
Yeah.
So currently, I have a mix of operators, owner operators, and suppliers. So doing some strategy piece with the supplier, talking through what it looks like to kind of refine messaging to meet the multifamily operator where they're
Yeah.
at. I just came off of a job contract in Austin where I sourced a new director of marketing for a company I was contracted on. That role that was really fun because I got to stretch my leadership chops
Mm,
a little bit more than I do in my I have another client who is long term since I launched last year and signed through the end of the year. And so I really fit in their space, kind of like a director of marketing and handle that role. But the one coming out of Austin was really kind of fun because I got to be a little bit more hands on.
yeah.
And that's really what I'm used to. You know, I like to be at the table in the conversations, asking the hard questions because if you don't, something gets dropped. So really, it's kind of a mix of everything I'm doing. I'll be really curious to kind of see how that shapes out as I, relocate to Chicago and what that penetration looks like as far as suppliers and owner operators up there. But I'm super excited. I think that what I do, it is a unique role for someone like me who came from the operator space and is, I
Yeah.
guess, considered a supplier, but really operating on behalf of owner operators. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of a cool space for me to be in.
Yeah. It's really cool because you get to be part of both, which is
Hmm.
great. Yeah.
Yes.
You've had a front row seat to a lot of AI rollouts. What is something that you've seen go really well and what made that work?
I would say probably like your Google business profile, AI components, adding that availability component to Google, having those posts come out. Those lifts seem pretty seamless from a
Yeah.
standpoint of having to connect things, right? Of course,
Yeah.
if you don't have a social component and you don't have your social media pages connected correctly, that causes a problem. But for me, I think that's one that really seems pretty painless
Yeah.
as long as all of your houses in order for those. And really, I think that type of AI, obviously, we've advanced so far past the Google Business Profile optimizers, right? There's so many other things that are out there now. But I think those AIs are a critical component to kind of feeding the soil, right? I always say that you can't expect the flower to grow if you don't give it good soil. And
Yeah.
I believe that Google Business Profile should be optimized 100%. You should be running SEO, reviews being responded to, products, like the whole nine.
Yeah.
Uh, our prospects are ending up there anyway. And if we spend $1,000 to get them to the website and they go to Google to check reviews and there's incorrect information, it's an immediate miss. So having
Yeah.
an AI component like a Google Business Profile optimizer just makes sense at this point. It really should be
Mm.
considered an operations tool, if you want my opinion, instead of a marketing expense. It's just the cost to do business now. And that's my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Is there, on the flip side, something that you've seen disconnect quite frequently?
I can think of a couple things. I think the biggest overarching component to a disconnect is a misunderstanding from either the supplier or the owner operator and what they can expect. This kind of goes back to what we
Mm,
were talking about before. If you don't have someone in the back end of integrations that understands the speak, what's necessary,
yeah.
what kind of feeds are included, it can get very convoluted, and operators don't necessarily know that they need that type of knowledge and understanding until they get into the weeds. And on the flip side, our suppliers don't really know that there isn't an understanding until we get in the weeds. And so I think better communication overall would kind of help solve some of those misses that seem small, maybe, but when you look at the big picture of a rollout overall from vetting to end, communication being tightened up is critical across all of those components.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like everybody wants to say that they have an integration, but it's like the level of integration really is
Yes.
important. And it's
Hmm.
sometimes it can be hard to speak to that.
Yeah, well, and on that, I believe that unless we're properly talking through the solve, right? I think that goes back to finding the solution to the perceived problem.
Yeah.
That's why it's so critical to really do homework, talk to different people, and really understand what problem you're solving. Because if you don't know what problem you're solving nothing.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk about on-site training and attribution. Let's talk about that on-site. Do you think that it's still not really prioritized at the time of hire, like training them on the correct tools? And is there a cost associated with having those gaps?
Yeah, I will die on the hill that we need to work digital marketing theory into onboarding training. I put a survey out maybe a month
Yeah,
ago on LinkedIn, and very few people said yes that they have that. And I think the cost of not having that is an attribution disaster, number 1, right? Our teams don't understand why that attribution is important, but number 2, if, your leads are saying Google when it's really coming from an ILS or a paid source like your PPC or a social component. You can't have clarity in the data, and it's crap for strategy in the first place.
yeah,
So I think
yeah,
understanding what's you're putting into the system, whether that's a CRM, whether that's a property management software, whether that's anything, an AI component to build out social posts. If you give it crap going in, you're going to get crap going out. And so the quality of the data going in is critical to making sure that these AI components work properly. Otherwise, we're not getting anywhere, and
right.
not getting the right answers.
Totally. How do you think it would be best to fix the mess? I know that there is such a disconnect, and I've even thought about it, working with Effortless because that is our goal, pay per click. And so, how do we make everybody understand the whole process and fix it?
Yeah, I always like the idea of having a regional marketing director or a regional type person to if there's not a digital marketing theory roped in and worked into your onboarding training, having
Yeah,
someone being on site to give them a crash course. Hey, Paul's coming for an hour today. We're going to talk about why attribution is important, and having that type of a role across your organization, I believe would be a great way to fix that. I think we see the VP of marketing and the chief marketing officer roles kind of molding and shifting, and we're getting into a different space where different types of roles are being created to solve unique challenges.
yeah,
And I think that's a really good thing because I think that means people are paying attention to the
yeah,
gaps and they're trying to fill them. Another thing to be doing is your tracking audits, making sure your regionals understand your tracking, understanding what kind of, tools are in place, your UTMs, your tracking phone numbers, your tracking emails. If you have an ace in the place where everyone is getting the same messaging about the tools, it just makes the process a lot more seamless.
yeah, absolutely. I always said when I worked on the other side of things, like I worked with training and marketing, and we always trained on leasing skills and sales skills. But I always felt like the side that was missing is the tech enablement
Mhm.
and making sure that they can explain it to the teams like, this is what this is how it works, this is why it's important. Even if it's just that, I think that would make a world of difference. But yeah,
Well, and think about years ago, right? I started in this business in 2012. And so as we've seen
yeah,
the rollout of these tools, we still haven't gotten to the right position to accurately and get these teams the training they need. It's
right.
we got to change. We got to get with the times. So I suppose
Yeah.
that's what the messaging is there for, right? To drive people to start to pay attention to that lack of understanding.
Yeah. Totally. If we were to get with the times, what would the dream onboarding look like for somebody in that role?
I mean, we're going to get there. I believe we're
Yeah.
going to get there. A dream onboarding, geez, I think this is a loaded question. Video, a video welcome talking about
Yeah.
the company, right? Talking through in-person meetings with different heads, specific to a marketing role. If I'm onboarding and I'm working with a team of 4, getting that entire team together, level
Yeah.
setting on what the expectations are, KPIs, right? And expectations. I seen so many times where somebody is trying to achieve a goal without really understanding the expectation. And to me, if I have the expectation, I can achieve your goal much quicker. So understanding what marketing's role is, what my role is in our marketing team, how
Yeah.
can marketing support you as operations, I believe is critical to bringing somebody on. I just believe firmly that when we focus on people and allow them to be themselves, but also show us what they're capable of, whether that's
Yeah.
marketing, whether that's an assistant who's slick with numbers and they're going to be like a financial analyst in a corporate in 5 years. Sometimes I think we don't give our on-site teams enough credit to understand the higher level information to help them grow.
Yeah.
That may be an opinion
Absolutely.
that not a lot of people share, but that's how I feel.
No, I'm totally with you on that. Like, I think a lot of times as marketers, we want to have the full control of things. And sometimes they have
Mm,
to loosen it a little bit just to give people that sense of having autonomy over their
yes.
positions. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I was a one-man marketer for a long time, and the mistakes I made and stepped in my own way and then
Yeah.
realized, crap, that was a mistake and had to fix it. That's how you really grow as a person, and I
Yeah.
believe as a marketer, because being a marketer, you have to take risks, take chances. You can't sit back and be like, "Oh, we better not try this." Like, no, let's get in front and try this. So, it takes a
Yeah.
certain level of guts to really dive into our roles.
Yeah. I totally agree. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about tech stack strategy and coming back to integration a little bit as well. When those systems that we have in place are not talking to each other, sometimes we miss prospects. Like I was mentioning with that pilot that I did, we lost a bunch of. Where do you see the biggest integration failures happening in our leasing process?
A couple different places. Operations don't understand where the information's coming from,
Hmm.
or where things are connected. A real life example I can give you right now is the phone trees. Rolling out an AI requires vanity numbers not only from your CRM provider, but also your AI provider. How are those interfacing and what kind of integration is required? What does one number do to the other when you replace it? Those types of thought processes I don't think are happening. Really, if we don't have a solid, and this kind of goes back to backing into it for the problem, right? If we don't know the phones are correct and set up correctly, then we shouldn't roll out an AI. So
Hmm.
the end result in the experience should be the biggest, in my view, driver to solving a problem with AI. How can we enhance our resident experience? How are we enhancing the prospect experience? How are we enhancing like our internal organizational experience with this AI? Coming into it kind of backwards. And I say that all the time, but that's how I solve problems,
Yeah.
understanding what the perfect solve is and then trying to achieve it by thinking how you would do it before you start just makes much more sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there other questions that you think people should be asking when they're looking at this kind of technology to make sure that it does work the way we want it to?
Yeah, I think understanding what their goal is, obviously, we talked about that. Who are the other stakeholders that you can bring in to talk about? I'm thinking a resident portal or something like that.
Hmm.
You'd want to bring in, accounting, right? If they have a rent payment component, those types of conversations are going to be critical to do. Whose opinion is considered, right? Are we rolling this out and there's a CEO at the top that doesn't care about anything until it's completed? Have we at least understood what that opinion or that expectation is for this rollout? So I think that, thinking through larger picture, what support is going to be required really, I think is also a big question to ask, right?
Yeah.
You and I are marketing support. AI is really great, but if they don't have a marketing person to support updating tracking numbers or they don't have someone to feed a knowledge center within the AI, the ball gets dropped. So
Yeah.
Having a good support system is key to something like this.
Yeah, and I feel like that really will prevent a lot of failure later on. Like when you do roll out, sometimes we see the systems break as soon as you do the rollout, and so it can
Mhm.
kind of prevent that from happening.
Yeah. Which, listen, I don't love it when the system breaks, but more recently, I did have a drop in the rollout, and it helped us identify a different issue, and so we were able to fix that issue before we ran into it again. So
Yeah.
I caution people to not freak out if AI rollout doesn't go exactly how you expect it to go. There is room for improvement when you make a mistake and or something drops. And I've often found that in those times, not even in an AI rollout, but just in my career, it's in the times where I'm feeling most vulnerable or most like, oh, that I learn the most and I come out stronger because of it. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid if your AI rollout doesn't go as planned because sometimes that's good. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be
Yeah.
prepared for everything, but if it drops, it
Yeah.
drops,
Yeah, I feel like there's
you know?
always something you didn't think of and you're
Yes.
like, "Oh shoot, I thought of everything else but this one thing."
Yes. See,
Yeah.
that's why I like to back in because that's my process of trying to do like what ifs, like trying to make sure there's no
Yeah.
room for error is my lot in life, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like what was I reading where people talk about how that as a personality trait can be perceived as, being negative or
Yes.
kind of like poking holes, being contrarian, but it's like I'm the same way. It's more I'm trying to prevent things from happening. I'm trying to think of
Yes.
all the things so that this doesn't happen. And it's not necessarily trying to be negative, it's just I'm trying to help you.
No, totally. I'm right there with you. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Somebody has to play our role.
Right.
Somebody
Someone has
has
to
to
do
be that
it.
person. I'm
Yeah.
happy to be that person for anybody.
Yeah. So I want to move over to talking about campaign strategy and the resident journey. We talk about meeting prospects wherever they're at, but what does that look like in terms of AI logic?
Meeting them where they're at. So
Hmm.
I think about my own behavior on social media, having a social component to your ad campaigns, right? That's one thing. When you're talking about an AI follow up, understanding when are the touch points that you're expecting your AI to talk to the resident?
Yeah.
What's the cadence? What time of day? People rarely think about pulling Google Analytics and figuring out how when your website is most active and really having that type of understanding for these types of things, the AI specifically, to make sure that everything is covered and the AI is on at that time, right? Because
Yeah.
most of these transactions we know don't happen during office hours. People are
Yeah.
online late night, middle of the night. So if we're not providing them with accurate information, whether they're on the website or on Google, having this AI in place and having the correct information in the core, the base, the heart of the knowledge to go out to everywhere else is super important. So again, if you give it what it needs, it will give you what you want it to give. But if you're not giving it what you want it to give, it's not going to give it. So I think that
Yeah.
knowledge piece is super important and really understanding what these conversations look like. I remember going through some CRM conversations. I think it was a couple weeks back and thinking through what these people were thinking when they were
Mm.
responding and kind of not just going to it from okay, is this like the resident, is this the prospect, is this the leasing agent, is this the AI, right? You have to understand these communication methods, and diving into these conversations where there's AI is involved, I think helps suss out those types of gaps.
Yeah. And this is why we're always going to need a co pilot when it comes to AI. Like, it's not just going to take over everything.
Yeah, no, I just think being in the weeds,
Yeah.
some people don't like to be in the weeds. I personally love to be in the weeds
Yeah.
because that's where I can be most productive because that's where I can challenge myself the most too.
Yeah, I'm with you. Coming back to AI a little bit, how does that help us tailor outreach or follow up based on where that person is in their journey?
Messaging,
Yeah,
right? I think we see a lot of people talk about this on LinkedIn. They're looking for a lease on, July 1st of 2026 and the follow-up says, "Hey, can you come in for a tour this weekend?" Like it's
yeah,
instant break in the trust. And we talk about this over and over at length, but it continues to be a problem. So I think there's two solves. Number one, owner operators need to focus a bit more on that piece of it on their side, right? But
Yeah.
Suppliers, we also need to understand that we can have no assumptions on the owner operators. We can assume nothing. We can assume they know nothing about what we're going to give them. And so taking extra care
Yeah.
to give them what they need is going to be putting you way ahead of the competitors and whatever else that is, you know. And I'd also say having a supplier partner in your AI that understands this piece of it, the prospect, the resident operations and leasing piece of it, and really takes that to heart is going to be really impactful as well. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
any company is good, bad, or indifferent. What I'm saying is there's a certain understanding, if you've been on site, how these conversations in AI need to go and how when they need
Hmm.
to be triggered. You know,
Yeah.
it's all about a cadence, and you have to understand your own behavior.
Yeah, I mean, the vendor partner can always have their best recommendation, but you know your customers. So
Hmm.
having your data is going to be the most impactful.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit and just kind of talk about your role in general, because I know earlier in the conversation we were talking about how you come from the operator side, but you can still be seen as a vendor running
Mhm.
consultancy. So how do you navigate that in general?
I take a two-prong approach maybe. So I keep the relationship from a consulting perspective with my clients and their vendor partners. I keep that intact, but I also communicate with them on my own. The reason I do that is because supplier partners I've been around a long time will tell you a lot more when it's just you than they will when a client's on the phone.
Yeah.
I believe in order
Yeah.
to accurately and efficiently optimize a campaign, I actually need to know the truth. And I'm not saying that the owner operator may not be telling the truth, but they may not have the understanding that like you and I would have if we were on a
Yeah.
call going over a PPC campaign for effortless. Like it would be
Yeah.
a completely different conversation than if we had a client on the phone, right?
Right.
So being the liaison when I need to be, but also taking the lead when I can is how I kind of navigate that.
Yeah, I kind of think of when you as a marketer, you're trying to sell a tool up the chain of command, but you think it would just be so much easier to have that person sell directly to them because
Hmm.
you're not familiar with selling that product. It's kind of the same thing when it comes to integrations and things like that. Like you're not the person, you're in the middle and
Yeah.
we need them to talk to each other.
Yes. And it's hard to buy in, I think, across the board is always hard when you're pushing a new initiative or marketing tool. I think it's especially hard when we are that intermediary and you're getting time on the calendar and it's super important. And I found I shouldn't say very early on, but pretty early on in my marketing career that my things that I think are important do not align with what the CEO thinks is important or the
How do you get
COO
them to
or
see your side
regionals or
when it comes to
anything.
things like that? Yeah,
That's just it. Like you run
like you
into
can't.
no, and you kind of have to sit
Yeah.
there, like twiddling your thumbs, waiting for them to actually care about what you have to offer. But also, I think inserting yourself in different ways, like getting into, organizational meetings, that type of thing is always impactful too.
Yeah, I always loved it when I would be pushing something, nobody'd be listening, and then later they're like, "I had this great idea. It's XYZ." And I'm like, "Just said that." Like, I've
Yeah.
been saying
Yep.
that for months. But
Yep.
it really has to be their idea.
Yeah. Well, and I think once we learned that, at least once I learned that, I was able to change my messaging and
Hmm.
understand what triggers them to make a decision and give them what they need to make the actual decision,
Mm,
right? Giving
yeah.
it to them all on a silver platter so that you already know what they're going to say, the type of questions they're going to ask. It's making it an easy yes.
Yes, absolutely. I know they would always ask questions and I'd be like, I thought you might ask that and I didn't get the answer. Dang it. Like, you got to do all your homework
Yep.
beforehand.
Yep. I've been there too, for sure. I had
Yeah.
a boss, Kelly Blaskowski. I think she still works for Capstone. She was very much that person. Like she'd want to know every answer. Every time I went to her, she'd have a different question. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Ask me all your
anticipate
questions
all
at
these
once.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll give them to you. So I learned how to kind of read that situation. And it's been helpful for me moving forward
Yeah.
for sure.
I feel like in those moments, it's so frustrating, but then when you come out of it, it helps you become more strategic and really
Yes.
think things through. So
Yeah.
it is a good thing.
Yeah, it's one of those growing pains that you're like, "Ugh," but then
Yeah.
now that makes perfect sense.
Yes. Well, speaking of moments of friction, what is one hoop that you've had to jump through just to get the basic information that you need as a consultant?
A couple different things. I think the biggest one is kind of like getting caught in like a loop with the customer service agent. Like, I need this. Okay, well, let me transfer you to this person. No, this is I told X I needed this. Did they deliver the message? Oh no. I'm just trying to help you. Can I get this access? Oh, well, that needs that person. So I think as a consultant, my relationship with my clients is mine, but I have to remember that the supplier partner, the vendor partner's relationship with the client is theirs. So
Mm,
while I can be assertive in my approach, really, I have to respect that my client and the supplier partner's relationship because I'm really that third party piece. I'm not
yeah,
under the, effortless umbrella or whatever it is, right? I'm not
right.
paid by a certain company. So I think that's been a little bit challenging is kind of just waiting for someone at whatever company supplier to reply.
It's all in the
So.
communication. Yep.
Mhm. Yep. And
Yeah.
I think knowing your audience and understanding how I can help solve a problem for the supplier partner has been super beneficial. I
Yeah.
think consultants like me have a unique ability to see these different tech tools and products on the market. And when they come into play for our own clients, we can sell them, but we also talk to people. And so having an understanding of the
Mm,
new and upcoming things is always super fantastic. I love just getting on a
yeah.
demo with something new and exciting for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to the way that consultants are treated in general, what needs to change so that they can help really drive value to their owner operators?
This may be a hot topic, but I think cost of conferences or the way that consultants are framed
Yeah.
for those conferences, I think is probably how we would answer this question. I submitted to speak at NAA, I submitted to speak at AIM and wasn't chosen for either, which is fine. But I'm also not paying close to 10K with a hotel cost to get to California, and I don't want to pay $7,500 to get to NAA with a hotel cost and registration.
Right. Yeah.
I just don't believe that's the right way to treat a consultant who's operating on behalf of the people you are serving. I have
Yeah.
one supplier client, but I work with owner operator primarily. That's my bread and butter. And you would think that especially these multifamily prop tech companies would want to give like a deck away and have some exposure to their tools, but they're just so protective. I mean, you know that. We've been around a long time. Like
Yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
want anyone else to know that's not part of the ecosystem of their client. And I believe it does them a disservice. I really do. I would talk a lot more about different products, but I've had negative experiences with people and
Yeah.
having those. So I'm just not going to go out and talk about that. I mean, Effortless is a great example of a product I've used and I'll talk about it until the cows come home that it's awesome. And I'll always be a proponent of it.
Yeah.
That's because I think, Effortless has invested in me and shown me that they care about what I'm saying. So I
Right.
think giving these consultants a bit more legroom to be in the space with these marketing vendors at these bigger conferences is definitely a first step to changing that a bit in the game. I'm glad you clapped
Yeah.
because I always feel a bit like I could be on an island with that answer, but
No.
I'm not. That's good.
No, I mean, in so many ways. Like, I just had a friend bring this up to me as well. They're like, they weren't a consultant, but they were not really a vendor, not really an owner operator, really. So it was kind of like, where do I fit in at this conference? I'm not going to spend the $10,000 to go.
Mhm.
And I mean, even as a vendor partner, it makes me itch to think about how much money we're spending on these
Mhm.
things. It's like, but especially on your side, I can imagine.
Yeah. Well, and, on the operator side, it's nice because suppliers like you all get extra passes or whatever that
Uh-huh.
you can
Yeah.
hand out to like an AIM or something like that.
Yeah.
Some conferences aren't like that. Suppliers are never getting a free ticket anywhere because God forbid they learn about a product and go talk about it elsewhere.
Right. Yeah, I'm totally with you.
Gatekeeping the world.
Yes. Well, as we kind of come to a close, if you had a magic wand and you could fix one thing in the AI leasing experience tomorrow, what would you fix?
Poorly vetted workflows.
Mhm.
I would spend much more time testing. And by testing, I mean using any kind of workflow that you could kind of replicate that
Yeah.
looks similar to an AI and understand what steps will need to be taken. For example, putting the vanity number for the AI on first, you connect with the AI. I'm, a supplier, so I have to pick number 3. It rings and rings, and I get the same message. That's a
Mhm.
poorly vetted workflow. There needs
Yeah.
to be an end result, an end goal, an end game for everyone that phones our properties, right? So not just letting the AI pick up that endless loop, that I don't like. I hate that personally. I will scream into the phone like customer service and lay on 0 as long as I can. Like, it just bugs me so much if the back end is not connected properly.
Yes, totally. You sparked my memory. I remember I rented an awful rental car and I was in a dangerous situation where I'm like pulled over on the side of the freeway, calling the phone tree, and I kept getting the circle.
Mhm.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
give me a human. I
Yeah.
was getting so mad. But it's like, did anybody vet this thing? And that's
No,
why my rental car
probably
was
not, because that
shaky.
happens more and more to everyone. I bet you if anyone is
Yeah.
still listening to this podcast, they're probably shaking their head like, yes, I've had that happen.
Yeah.
So,
It's so infuriating.
yes.
What is one thing that on-site teams, marketers, and tech vendors can do today to start closing that AI disconnect?
I think number 1, understanding your own renter behavior, and
Yeah,
then pretending you're a prospect. Going down the road, Googling your community, doing
yeah,
a form fill on all of these places. Knowing where you have AI, purposely trying to trip the AI up,
yeah,
asking it questions that you know it should answer in different ways to see if the variations are going to come through.
yeah,
That's another thing that AI is getting better at, depending on the model type it is, but understanding the variations of these questions. And that's why I think these knowledge centers are so important, because if you can provide them that nuance of a variation of a word or a phrase or some type of amenity that could be on your community, it
yeah,
just tightens up that experience a whole lot.
yeah, definitely. I could totally see that. Well, as we kind of close out, this is a question that I ask every single one of my guests. But what is a tech tool that you are loving right now? It does not have to be related to this at all, but just something that you use in your everyday.
I use Gemini every day.
Yeah,
Currently, right now, we're moving to Chicago, so I've been using it to find different things, checking on train stations, that type of thing, especially because we're moving to the burbs. We're not really sure where we're gonna land,
yeah,
and having access to a train spot was important to us because we wanna get down into the city. And so,
yeah,
really just kind of asking Gemini every single question I've had and being able to go out from there maybe seems like a really generic answer, but it's the AI I use most.
yeah. Why
And
have you
it's the
ever
one I
compared
trust the
that?
most.
Have you compared
Huh?
that to ChatGPT at all?
I use Perplexity sometimes.
Oh,
So
okay.
I do it's weird, I'm weird. I do different things on different AI. Like, I'll
Yeah,
put into
yeah,
Perplexity something way different than I ever used Gemini for based on the results I get
right.
and what's coming through. I did put my business into AI one time, and it did return
Yeah.
pretty well. It was pretty accurate.
Oh, that's cool.
I would also encourage anyone to put into ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, your property name. Talk to me, tell me more about
Yeah.
X apartments and see what pops up.
Uh,
And I bet you'll find something you didn't know was online is there either increasing and enhancing your digital footprint or hindering it. So that
yeah.
should be the takeaway. Everyone needs to jump in their favorite AI platform and put in their own property name and see what pops up.
Yeah, I just had a friend in the industry on the operator side. She was asking me about basically AI, like SEO for AI, and I cannot remember the acronym she had used. But
Geo?
yeah, I'm just like, oh man, how do we get started with that? Because it is gonna come up more and more.
Yeah. Well, I also believe that we have to be hip to the game. We have to be understanding of these new terms and phrases, understanding that something's going to change in 6 months. Like chasing Google and like the ad console and understanding their rules and how their AI is changing and how they're bidding. I use third party Google, partners for that because I couldn't possibly keep up with all of that. Like I
Yeah.
don't have the understanding, right? And so I think we can do our best to try to understand these products, but they're going to continue to change. And it makes it not I shouldn't say difficult because it's kind of challenging to keep yourself in the game of understanding these things, but it makes it kind of a rat race. these
Yeah.
automations because they're always changing. Companies in our business are always scooping another product. And then all of a sudden that changes their offering. And then maybe you have some overlap on product and service. So it's a
Yeah.
consistent race to the finish line, which is never there. The finish line is never where
Yeah.
we think it's going to be.
Is there anything that you look at consistently to stay up to date with that kind of thing?
I watch LinkedIn quite a bit.
Yeah.
I feel very thankful that I've had clients that are utilizing AI and um, are willing to take demos and look at new things. I'm very proactive when I bring things to my client. For example, I'm getting us on a reputation call next week to discuss a different kind of platform that's maybe a bit more user friendly and kind of more efficient for their situation. And so I know I insert myself and put my nose maybe where other people wouldn't, but I'm just constantly asking for more and exciting information. I talk to my
Yeah.
suppliers all the time. Are there any changes I need to be aware of? If I have a question, I'll email them or I'll just meet with them. I meet with my people monthly because that's the
Yeah.
only way I can keep up with what's happening.
Yeah.
The best way to optimize a
Absolutely.
campaign, at least in my opinion. It's how I've been most
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well,
So,
thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find you and connect with you and learn more about what you're doing?
yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Paul McClain, AiinaT Brand Solutions. My website is AiinaT, AIINAT.com. You can find me wandering the streets of Chicago mid-July into early August, trying to get my wits about me. But yeah, I would love to connect with anyone, who's listening and find me on LinkedIn and of course, AiinaT on Instagram as well. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. It's been a great conversation.
talk to you soon. Thank you.